This is the usual third Friday WILPF meeting for WILPF San Jose branch. And we bring in various speakers to talk about issues that are critical in our area. So tonight we have one of those speakers, and Rowan will be introducing him. But first,
Yes, and so tonight we're going to hear from Todd Langton, our guest, who's the CEO of Agape Silicon Valley. The mission of Agape is to enhance the quality of life for the unhoused in Silicon Valley by identifying and serving the most vulnerable. So every month they go to 20 different unhoused communities in Santa Clara and Alameda County, bringing food, water, supplies, and clothing. And they also have an intake form so that they can help people get services, and they'll know who the people are. And I know Todd because he's on the board of the Silicon Valley Interreligious Council, and for the last several years for the Homeless Memorial has been one of the people coordinating our supply distribution that we do in conjunction with the Homeless Memorial. And so I'm really excited to learn more about Agape and have him as our guest tonight.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me tonight. I've been looking forward to this, and I always love to tell lots of stories about the journey with working with the unhoused and how Agape all got started. But it actually back in 1991 in Salt Lake City, Utah, I was so naive. I bought this little house in the area called Sugar House in Salt Lake City. And it needed some work. And I thought, well, I'll borrow my brother's truck and my dad's toolbox, and I'll go to the house and just start remodeling it. I walked in the front door and I go, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? There was, it needed a lot of work. And I remember this unhoused person over at by the grocery store in front of the Wendy's about 3 blocks away, and he'd had a sign that says, we'll work for food. I thought to myself, boy, he could help me remodel my home. And so I drove the truck around, and I always like to look at someone's eyes, and I believe the eyes are windows to the soul. And I drove around in about 8 or 9 times, kept and rolled down the window, looked at him, and he probably wondered, what the heck is this guy doing? But about the 8th time I drove around, I rolled down the window and said, hey, do you want to work? And he goes, yes, I do. So he hopped in, and I drove him to my home. And I had rented a steamer so you could steam off the wallpaper. And there's like 7 layers of wallpaper, and tore up the carpet. Anyway, the reason I mentioned that is that we were just working like crazy. And while we're working together, scraping that wallpaper off the walls, I listened to his story. And I said, how did you become, and I used the word homeless back then, how did you become homeless? And he says his mother and father, he and his 2 siblings, and they were in their early teens, and 9, 10, and 13 years old, they lost their parents. And I can't remember exactly how they lost their parents, but his name is Chris. He became homeless at the age of 11. And you could tell that the story he was telling me was accurate. He was 55 years old at the time, and he looked 85 or 75. He looked much older than his age. And so we're working away, and he says, well, Todd, we need some more help. And he says he has a friend that's a construction worker that just recently became homeless. And his name is Steve. And it says, well, let's go get him. And Steve had a contractor's license. He had worked for his brother's construction company, and had some major problems with alcohol. So his brother fired him from the company. and his wife kicked him out of the house. And he's now off the I-80 off ramp, going the one I-80 that goes up to Park City. And he's got the sign that says, "We'll work for food." And I remember seeing him several times as I took that exit to get to my home. So the two of them over the next 3 months worked in my house side by side. Several nights they slept in the basement and used the showers, the bathrooms and so forth. And we became very good friends. And it just really opened my eyes in a big, big way to the challenges of the unhoused. And the interesting part of this story is that I tell this to everybody. I says, who do you think, or I asked this question, who do you think was the most reliable out of the two, out of Chris and Steve? And who showed up all the time, who showed up on time, showed up regularly, and who worked their what off? And it was Chris, the one who had been unhoused since he was 11 years old. And there was times there that I literally had to unplug the light, the lamp, and the steamer, and say, "Chris, we're done. We're finished for the day." And he just wanted to keep going and going and going. And I just, these two were it was just a wonderful experience for me. And that was clear back in 1991. And I'm by the way, this Agape is just, it's not a full-time job. It kind of is a full-time job, but it's not a paying position. We're just a small little nonprofit. But I'm a financial advisor with New York Life and been in the industry for a long, long time. And my then wife and I were transferred to Santa Rosa, California back in 1998. And then I got in the typical mode of a lot of people in Silicon Valley, and a lot of us that just going to work every day, coming home tired, watching the news a little bit, checking your email, and then doing the same thing every day. And this is about 7 years ago, I finally says, something's missing in my life. I feel like I wasn't fulfilling what I felt I should be doing. I wasn't giving back. And I remembered in Salt Lake City back in 1991, 92, how happy it was, how much happiness and joy I felt working with Chris and Steve. So I simply hopped on Google and did a search for homeless outreach and found an organization called Sleeping Bags for the Homeless. And I thought that was an interesting name. Do they deliver sleeping bags every week or every 2 weeks? And it's just, we did deliver a lot of sleeping bags, but a lot of clothes and supplies and things. And this was about 2 years before the pandemic, and great experiences. And the COVID hit, and then most everybody stopped. A lot of as we know, when COVID first hit, there was seemed like the world came to a halt, and a lot of people in that group didn't want to go out anymore. And there's about 3 or 4 of us that said, "No, we got to keep going." And so we just we started delivering more food and some clothing, more food and hygiene kits and things like that. But we were asking other organizations, and like the Office of Supportive Housing, the Santa Clara County, we knew that they had donations that they would give to us. They needed us or people like us to go out and help with the unhoused. They'd always ask, "Well, what is your name?" Because you got to sign up, and they got to make a record of who they gave these supplies to. And says, "Well, we really don't have a name. We're just out there delivering stuff." and this is probably about the time right here. This is probably about 6 or 7 months after we started into the COVID. You know how we're all social distancing there. But to bring that story to how we came up with the name, New York Life had a Super Bowl commercial, the only commercial New York Life has ever had in a Super Bowl. This is about 4 years ago. It was a very touching commercial. And they had this young couple that just had a baby. This is all in about probably about 120 seconds, 2 minutes commercial. Young couple had a baby, and then the baby got older and older, and the parents had so much love, so much love for the baby as it's growing to an adult. And then this adult child starts taking care of the parents. And you can go on YouTube and Google and search it, but it's you just type in New York Life Super Bowl commercial. But they were talking about the Greek definitions of love, and I think there's 3 or 4 of them. And one of the words that struck my heart in this commercial was based upon the phrase agape. In Greek means unconditional love. And I said, look, this is, I issued it to the group. I said, what do you think? And I said, this is great. So we came up with the name, and then the next thing we did, we came up with a logo. And then there's another nonprofit group I'm going to talk about a little later, but it's run by an attorney, and she did our 501c3 paperwork for us. And we became a full-fledged nonprofit. And we would promote it pretty heavily and on Facebook, and we're looking for more volunteers. We wanted to make a bigger difference in the lives of others. But our premise was, and still is that anybody that's got a full stomach, has clean clothes on, and they have some of their basic hygiene needs met, and they have some sort of a roof over their head, they're going to make better decisions than those who don't. And so we would use the food and the clothing and the supplies, hygiene kits, as a way of building the trust with that individual, and then encouraging them to make better decisions. And we didn't know the whole housing situation at that time, or how the Office of Supportive Housing worked and so forth. But we encouraged people to, meet with their social worker and get the ball rolling, perhaps for housing. But bottom line is our mission statement was, we want to enhance the standard of living of the unhoused and just help them get the basics they need. But we would say this in every group, and that is the most important thing that we're delivering. It may look like it's the hygiene kit or the sleeping bag or the clothes or the groceries, but in reality, the most important thing that we delivered was our smile and our compassion and our love. And it just so happened that as we did that, as we all know in life, when you get in that mode of giving and sharing and loving, it comes right back at you. So a lot of reciprocal, wonderful relationships out there with the unhoused. And so we would get together and go on these. At the time, it was a distribution every other Saturday. And we'd go out and do our delivery. And then we would follow up if somebody needed a tent or clothes or shoes. We didn't have it at the time. We would follow up with them and go out during the week. But it was mainly every 2 weeks, go out and do this. And then I met, I told you about this other organization who runs it she did our 501c3 paperwork and helped us become a nonprofit. She runs an organization called the United Effort, and they work out of a church parking lot in Mountain View on Hope's Corner, another nonprofit that she's involved with. In Hope's Corner, they were doing showers and meals and clothing and all that, and laundry right there at the church. They got a big grant from Google to remodel the church. Doing a great job. But Way Hansen, this individual that runs this smaller nonprofit, and she was part of Hope's Corner. She said, we need to do more. And with her legal background, she knew that there were a lot of resources. As she studied it up, she found that there's a lot of resources that they can get, from what we call an Obama phone. the phones, there's food stamps, Medi-Cal, bus passes. There's vouchers for an unhoused person to get an ID and different things like that. But their goal is to be, and what United Effort did was they connected themselves with the Office of Supportive Housing and got on board with the HMIS, Homeless Management Information Services, and the VSPADAT, which is the testing, the vulnerability test that's Santa Clara County uses to determine who gets in line first for housing. So anyway, make a long story short, Way Hansen says, Todd, don't you want to do more than just deliver food and clothes? And I says, well, I'm pretty proud. We all said this. We're pretty proud of the fact we're delivering food and clothing and hygiene kits and building that relationship and helping people. And then last February, we finally said, it's time to enhance what we do with Agape, because we're already out there in the fields. We go to, like was mentioned earlier, we have about 5-6 teams, and each team would get one of these blue tarps, by the way. And inside the sacks, there's all sorts of supplies, fruit and hygiene kits and so forth. Sometimes batteries and phone chargers. In these black bags was hot food that it still comes from Loaves and Fishes. So we had multiple organizations helping us and still do helping us with our distributions. But we were building these great relationships, and we are building these great relationships with delivering the food and the clothing. And as I said before, the smile and their compassion. What a great time to now say, okay, would you like to start the path to getting housed? And what other resources do you have and don't have? And so we teamed up. We're still doing our distributions, but 1 or 2 members of each team. And by the way, we have like 5 or 6 teams, and there's about 5 or 6 people on each team, and each team would go to 2 or 3 or 4 different encampments. So while we're out there, we said, well, geez, if we're going to be out there, one team or 2 team members can start doing these intake forms. And all the intake form the intake is just a Google form where it has these basic questions and just enough information to find out where this person is in relationship to getting housing on the homeless information, the HMIS program. And so we started doing these we changed to have only one large distribution at the end, the last Saturday of every month. And then throughout the month, between the distribution and then each month, it's really just organically, we follow up with the people that we did the intake forms on, and what information they need to get, what supplies they need. And but the main thing is we want to get them the resources that the United Effort, that organization in in Mountain View, has just mastered. And I urge you to, if you get a second to, I'll put this in the chat later on, but if you get a second to Google the United Effort, look at their website. It's just amazing. It's just awesome. They have all the resources and then some to help the unhoused. And so we got the main distribution once a month, last Saturday of each month. We've got supplies coming from Loaves and Fishes, from Martha's Kitchen, from the county Office of Supportive Housing. They have emergency supplies that we get, and it's usually tents and tarps. We call them the yellow bags. They're from Martha's Kitchen. They actually originate at Second Harvest, and they've got canned foods, shelf stable type of food. And these nice little yellow bags, and really nice. And the hygiene kits, the Rotary Club of San Jose and the Order of Malta. The Order of Malta been around 900 years. I didn't even know about them. And they're a charity within the Catholic diocese or church. Many of you probably already know about it, but they build hygiene kits and they ship them all over the Western United States. So, okay, we're out there delivering this. And then our focus has been to identify the most vulnerable. And the most vulnerable perhaps is somebody that's disabled or has mental, physical health issues. Perhaps they're elderly. They've got some alcohol issues and they need to get housed. And so we'll focus on doing that little intake form with somebody. And we're just asking, hey, would you like more resources? Would you like to get on the track for getting housed? They go, yes. Well, in order for us to help you, we just need to find out some information. It's only about 15 questions, and it is a Google form. And we asked their name, their birthday, what benefits they currently have, things like Medi-Cal or food stamps and so forth, bus passes, and most of them don't have any of that. And then the information goes to the United effort, and then their team lets us know where this individual's at. And they may have had a VSPADAT test done a couple of years ago, and nobody followed up with them. And when I say nobody, I mean the big nonprofits like PATH, Life Moves, and so forth, or Home First didn't follow up with them. And so the United effort and us now, we're teaming up and finding out where the individual is on the housing spectrum. And bottom line is, over the last year since we did this, we started about March of 2023. Agape, just from our efforts, we've got about 22 people housed, and you'll see some of them here in a minute. So that's the main distribution, once the last Saturday of every month. And it looks just like this. You know, we go in the parking lot. This is my New York Life parking lot, where we moved away from this last weekend. We moved 2 blocks away. We thought we had this parking lot every other Saturday for indefinitely. And we were there doing this for about 2 years on these every other Saturdays. And I called the property manager and said, hey, thank you so much. I left a voicemail with him. Thank you so much for letting us use the parking lot. And by the way, can we put a donation bin in the lobby of the building? And she calls back and says, Todd, we didn't approve you to do this every other week. We just approved you to do a one-time deal 2 years ago. And it's one of those things you thought, oh boy, I wish I did not left that voicemail. But bottom line is, we've now moved our distribution to the parking lot. We've got a great relationship with the Cathedral of Faith over off of the Kurtner exit off of 87. So we have their parking lot we go to on last Saturday every month, kind of telling the story of how we've evolved the last 4 or 5 years. And obviously the donations are crucial and very, very much a part of it. And we're getting those donations from so many different organizations. They need us, we need them. They need somebody to distribute the things that they get and that they have. And then you've got smaller little youth groups that there's an organization called Play up. It's mostly Chinese young high school kids up in Pleasanton, and a youth group, and they donate all sorts of things to us. We got the Loaves and Fishes, Martha's Kitchen, the county, SEVA International, the Indian organization service group, Hunger at Home. It's a wonderful situation where you got individuals that get together and make little beanies. They knit beanies and scarves and things. And we've gotten the word out. We've done a pretty good job on social media to make this happen. Monthly distributions, we go out and follow up. And quite often this follow-up, and this is something we need a lot of help with, and what we're finding is before somebody can get housed from the county program, they've got to get these things, these issues caught up. They need a copy of their Social Security card. I don't have a copy of my Social Security card, but if I need to get one, I know how to go do it. They need an ID. So they got to have some form of ID. Many of them don't have a driver's license, but we give them vouchers to get their ID. um, we have to verify that they've been homeless for the last year. We've got to, all these things come together before the county can offer them housing. So we're literally picking the unhoused person up and driving them to the Social Security Administration office and starting the process for them to get their Social Security card. We're taking them to the DMV so they can get their ID. But in the meantime, there's other things that they can get, these other benefits. So YMCA pass, bus passes, and so forth. It's been a wonderful experience to build that relationship up to the point where they trust us to give us this information about them. And then we can now start to get them on track to get housing. So in summary, what do we, our focus? Well, obviously food and supplies. We use that to build the trust. And this is something that's really, and we all know this, we've learned about this through our whole lives, but when there's trust, things can really happen. People can grow and develop. And so the trust that's built in the relationships opens up all sorts of opportunities. We start really focusing on the most vulnerable, do the intake forms. We're looking for, there's emergency situations out there where somebody needs to get out of an encampment because there's some domestic violence going on. When I say some, that goes on quite a bit. We want to know when the abatements are, the sweeps are. This was what is a real challenge for the unhoused, is when their camps get abated and they've got to go and they got to leave and they lose all their possessions and they've got to go find somewhere else to hopefully get a new tent and new tarps and new supplies, because most of the time during those sweeps, they lose everything. So like I said, bus passes, phones, ID vouchers, food stamps, but then our real effort that we're really getting a hold of because of these intake forms is to help them get housing. And so this marriage, not a marriage, but this symbiotic relationship between the United Effort, and again, I'll put their website in the chat room here in a minute, but the United Effort and Agape, we're working together very seamlessly now, but we do need help as far as mentors that will actually go up and pick up an unhoused person and give them a ride to the DMV, give them a ride to the Social Security office, and get the things that they need to get in order for them to get housing. Yeah, this is January 1st. No, excuse me, December 31st, 2022. So just a little over a year ago, New Year's Eve. And through our work, our distributions, we found this Mexican family, 11 members of a Mexican family living out on Corey Court off of Oakland Road. We found them about 2 months before this, and it was right around Thanksgiving time. Started building the relationship with them. They had, there was 4 children, school-aged children, that was living in these tents and these cars. And we just, we really focused on helping them. But anyway, on New Year's Eve, they called me, and if you remember the flood, the rains, the storms we were having on New Year's Eve last year, in 2022, going into 2023, it was, this creek used to be so small, and now it was taking over all their tents. Just a mess. They call me yelling and screaming and say they're losing everything. One of the children thought it was okay to go for a swim in this big, looked like a lake now, and he almost lost his life. But we go out there and we gather them all up, and we took them to Motel 6. And Agape, we've done a pretty good job with the grant, getting some grant money and some donations. We had some money where we could pay for this family to stay in Motel 6 until some other opportunities came along. Well, the word got out in the circles of organizations like Destination Home and the Lived Experience Board, and the other bigger nonprofits, that there's this Mexican family that is now in Motel 6, and this little Agape Silicon Valley is paying for their motel bill. So Destination Home came in, and took over paying the payments and started working with them on a case by on doing their social work for them to help them on the housing track, paying the motel bill, and a lot of other organizations, including Agape, got them new clothing and so forth. And then 2 weeks later, Life Moves came in and started doing casework with them, put them in another transitional housing situation, still a Motel 6 out on the Alameda, where they are to this day. So, and now the kids are going to school. And by the way, this is Christmas Day, a week before this incident out at Corey Court. So this is Christmas before the New Year's. We had them over to our clubhouse where I was living at the time. And we spent the whole Christmas day together. And we had presents for them, and we had the Mexican music going. Wonderful experience. This family had left Mexico about 1.5 years before this. And the cartel down in Mexico, in this little village that they lived in, had kidnapped these 4 children. And they were able to negotiate the kids getting out of this cartel that kidnapped them. And as soon as they got out, they just started walking towards the San Diego border. Somehow they made their way up to San Jose. I get speechless. I get emotional when I talk about these guys, but they've become dear friends of mine. They've been down to my home here in Hollister. I attend their birthday parties. I love these guys like my own family members. And so appreciative of the fact that we were able to find them in the first place through these distributions and then help them get on track for housing. All the kids are in school. Now the mother and the father are working 2 jobs each. And they're living in a Life Moves, like I said, Motel 6 there on the Alameda. Very rewarding to have this type of relationship and so forth. Now, let me go back to, you see this truck over here with the lights on in the background? It just so happens that 6 months later, I get referred to him that he needed an organ. He was about ready to lose his RV at Corey Court, the same place to this flood. And Way Hansen at United Effort did her intake form on him, and he asked, "Is there any way that somebody can help me pay my registration for his RV?" So it wouldn't. And there was a sweep, there was an abatement coming up, and he could have lost it all. Well, so I go out and meet him, and I said, "You look very familiar." And his name is Gabriel. And I says, "That truck of yours, that red truck, I've seen that before." I says, "Was that you on New Year's Eve 6 months prior?" He took it upon himself to get his truck down there and try to get all these people out. He's the one that jumped in the river to rescue this young boy that wanted to go for a swim. Wonderful human being. He's working full time, and it just so happened he lost his place to park his RV at his friend's home in the mobile home park, who, by the way, just happened to be right next door to Corey Court there, where they were living. And he was going to lose his RV unless we got some registration paid for. And so we made a deal with him, say, "Look, if you can come up with half of it, we'll come up with half. Agape will. And the check will be made out to the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, and you got to do your other half." And so within a week, it motivated him. And he rounded up some money to come up with his half. To this day, this guy is just doing very, very well. And he's got a really nice RV that works, and it's fairly new. He's a happy camper. But it all started with this distribution where we met the Mexican family, and then the New Year's Eve where they called us, and he was down there trying to rescue him. Wonderful story. Thank goodness Agape has gotten some funds, especially from the office of Otto Lee. Supervisor Otto Lee has some grant money available each year. It's called emergency grants, and he's helped, their department has helped us get a grant each year. Along with the other donations, we're able to do things like that. We're paid for a DMV. We put several people in motels for a couple of nights in emergency situations. This is a bittersweet story. This is Mama Faye. And if you Googled her name, it may take you back to 25 years ago when she was protesting how the city and the county were treating the unhoused, and at St. James Park, clear back in the late 90s. She was out there near Corey Court, off there in the Ritter Park area. She was living under an umbrella in her wheelchair, completely disabled, flies everywhere, but she was in a situation where she was visible. People would bring her supplies. She was living in her feces. And sad situation, bipolar issues, extremely sad. We found that we had an opportunity to get her. Actually, she had some heart problems. Somebody took her to the hospital, and next thing we know, we lost track of her. And somebody had actually built her a little tent, and we walked past it. And we heard her voice again, and said, "Mama Faye, is that you?" She goes, "Yes, come on in." And there she was in this tent situation, just right down from where her umbrella was. Anyway, we coached her into letting us build her a new tent because she was living in this mess. The flies, the rats were biting her fingernails. Anyway, make a long story short, we finally got her to go to the hospital, and that led to her going into a nursing facility. And there's a whole nother part of that story, but her life is better now where she's at. And she misses her freedom, misses her friends out there in the unhoused world. But that's Mama Faye. It's heartbreaking in a lot of situations, a lot of parts of the story. And the other parts of the story was just the most abundant amount of joy you could ever experience as a human being. Spending time with her and hearing her story and hearing her joy of her going through her trials and tribulations, yet she was always having this happy, smiley face on in this. And we went in there a couple of times and got her new tents, new sleeping bags, new everything. And but anyway, now she's in a nursing facility. She's not happy being there, but she won't go back to she doesn't want to go back to the campgrounds either. She's in a conservator situation now, and she's not able to make decisions to help to better herself. This is just 2 weeks ago. And this is Way Hansen. And she comes out with us quite often. But every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday morning, Way Hansen and her team are out there at Hope's Corner. And Hope's Corner is, again, they've got laundry facilities, they've got hot food for the person, the unhoused person. But Way and her team have got card tables in the parking lot where they do these intake forms. They'll do a VSPADAT test right there with the unhoused person. So this is Way Hansen. She's doing an intake form and helping this gentleman get some benefits that he needs. And this lady here is named Lucia. She came to the memorial that we had, the civic unhoused memorial we had 2 to 3 weeks ago. She's starting to get more involved with the resources because her son is getting out of jail next week. And he's got some major health problems, bipolar issues. He's getting out next week, and he's going to go back to the fields where he wants to live. And he'd been homeless prior to being in the jail. So she's become a part of Agape, and she's also getting involved in the United effort. the organization that this lady here, Way Hansen, runs. Tomorrow, she's asked me to go with her to the Redwood City Jail to visit her son so we can learn, I can build that relationship with him, and we can learn about how we can help find him resources, because he's going to get out of jail second week in February. So it's amazing how this is all, when we first started Agape 4 years ago or so, we were literally taking bottles of water and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches out. And then it evolved to all sorts of supplies and hygiene kits and so forth. It became a 501c3, and now we're doing mentoring with helping people get their ducks in a row so that they can get housed with the Office of Supportive Housing with the county. So right down this is the Guadalupe Trail area, by the way. This building here is on Rough Drive. It's the county benefits, one of the county benefits building. This is on the corner of Heading and Rough. Guadalupe Trail, where people are riding their bikes and exercising and so forth. A lot of unhoused people had their tents and their campings down that trail. So here's a story right down at the very end of that trail. We call that area the end of the world. A lot of the unhoused name this place the end of the world. And it's just, we go there regularly. This is Joy. Her name is Joy. For the last 2 years, since we've known her, she would not let us, she would take the supplies, but she was very resistant about giving her information so she could get housing. And she started seeing her neighbors, because of our efforts, were getting housed. And finally, last week, she let us do an intake form on her. And our goal is to get her housed, obviously. The sweet lady, so nice, so friendly and warm, and great lady. So I've got dozens of stories. We're just a bunch of people that have like-minded values, and we have some time to go out there and help people throughout the month, throughout the week. And we feel we're doing, honestly, we feel like we're doing the Lord's work. And I when we're out there in the encampments, it's just, there's just nothing more important than, we feel there's nothing more important than how we could be spending our time in helping these individuals. And many of them become my dearest friends. A lot of them have phones. I text message them, call them up, and as do our other volunteers. And we've built these relationships with people, and their lives are starting to change. So with trust comes growth and opportunities for change and bettering one's life. We are looking, I made this comment at the memorial, that we're looking for mentors to help us do that. And I caught myself saying that, we're mentoring them. And then I quickly said, but they're mentoring us. I'm learning more about myself and about life and about compassion than I could possibly mentor them with. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity to grow personally and to give back and to build these friendships and relationships. So anyway, I've been rambling, but that's the story of Agape. We've got about 30 regular volunteers to get together, and we have a monthly Zoom meeting where we plan out the next distribution. We have a storage unit where we keep a lot of our supplies, and we have a really organized system for putting those supplies together in those stacks that you saw above. We call it the ring around the rosy. We'll go around in circles with all these sacks and put all the donations in them, and we got the music going and having a lot of fun. So open it up for Q&A, and there's probably 200 or 300 more stories I could tell, but I don't want to bore you to death. But one thing I want to point out that I haven't talked about yet. You see some youth here. In our typical distribution, you'll have lot of junior high and high school kids. And it's just wonderful to see these high school kids who've never seen anything quite like this, and their parents who've never been out to an encampment before, didn't have any interaction with the unhoused people, and watch their paradigm shift. And then see these young kids that will go back after the distribution, and they'll say, "Mom and Dad, come on, we got to do a garage sale. We got to raise some money so we can buy some socks for our unhoused friends." There's been the typical lemonade stand in the summertime, but they come back and they just want to help. And then one of the biggest joys I have found is when I've been watching these young people talk and hand out the hygiene kits to the unhoused person, watching the young people do that. And I look back at their parent, and their parent is just beaming, just so proud, and to see what their child is doing. And I'll throw in a little, not a joke, but just a little comment. It says to the young high school kid, I said, "Hey, this makes you appreciate your parents, doesn't it?" And they go, "Yeah, yeah." But the compassion that these young people have, and hopefully we're building inside of them, and we are, with this desire to serve, to help the underprivileged, that will carry, it'll be a rippling effect for the umpteen years, for decades. And I look back at the Paula, you and I have some similarities where we grew up, how we grew up inside the church I was involved with, but we kept within. We didn't go, I don't remember doing any volunteer work in the community. And now, yeah, and I didn't start getting really involved until 1991, when I hired a couple of homeless people to help me remodel my house. And it wasn't about 15 years later that I got really involved in it. I said, "Geez, I'm late to the game." And I see these youth out there, they're just diving in, and their parents got them involved in other volunteering organizations. And it's just wonderful to see. And 10, 20 years from now, you see this, someone in their 30s and 40s, and see the development that they've had because they've been involved in opportunities to serve the underprivileged. So bottom line is, we know the purpose of life is to bless the lives of others. And by doing so, we bless ourselves, and we all grow together. So I'll shut up now and let you guys do some Q&A if you want. Or
So I have a question, Todd.
yes.
So you talked about the volunteers that are the junior high and the high school students. How did you get the ball rolling with your volunteers? How is it through the schools? You have team leaders, and those are pretty solid volunteers. How did you get that ball rolling?
Honestly, it was a big part of it was, there's a lot of negativity about Facebook and social media, but we use that big time. And we would people will say, "Well, why are you taking pictures?" And we do get permission to take pictures of the unhoused, but when we're doing the gatherings in the parking lot to gather all the donations, we take pictures and we promote it. And, we get them we'll get a phone call out of the blue, and somebody says, "Well, I want to join up and I want to come help." And they were having the same kind of mental, emotional thing I was having 7, 8 years ago, where I feel like I'm not giving back. They wanted to give back. And then quite often they say, "Well, can I bring my son?" I go, "Yes." And we have a disclaimer, a liability form that they need to sign. And then word gets out, and next thing you know, the Boy Scouts want to get involved, or the different groups, church groups that want to come and get involved. And we're fine with them coming once and never again. We're very happy when they come again, and extremely happy when they say, "No, they want to be a regular volunteer and come out on a regular basis." And they spread the word, they bring their friends. And so that's how the word gets out. Social media has been very helpful to spread the word. But each volunteer goes back and they talk to their friends and neighbors and so forth. They'll do shoe drives, and they'll pick up all these shoes and say, "Where are these shoes going?" "Well, we have a distribution coming up. We got to get the shoes out." What distribution? And they'll say, "Well, have you heard of Agape Silicon Valley?" And so it's marketing, it's branding. So yeah, good question.
So I'm going to just open it up to others to just raise your hand if you have a question, and it's for Todd.
I missed out on whether you gave us a way to contact you.
I'll type that in the chat if you like. And you can look us up on, we do have a website, agapesiliconvalley.org.
Ah, very good.
So if you Google Agape Silicon Valley, you'll find our website, and I'll put my phone number there and email address and so forth.
Great.
And so let's just talk shoe distribution, because shoes don't fit everybody. Do you take a whole bunch of shoes and then they come and choose?
This is a very good question. So we have 2 or 3 different churches that a lot of our leaders belong to. And there's Bill and Edna Perry. Maybe some of you have come across them before. That they're very involved in the Catholic Church, and they're constantly doing work helping the underprivileged. But they've taken charge of our clothing operation. And in the olden days, part of Sleeping Bags for the Homeless, what we didn't like is that we would literally get bags of donations, and we would not do anything with them until we went out to the encampment. We put a big blue tarp down, empty the bag, and let the unhoused person scramble around. Not much dignity, not hygienic. So when we started Agape, we said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And so we'll get donations, and Bill and Edna and their team will take those clothes and they'll triage them. They'll get rid of the clothes that don't fit or it's not a match for the unhoused person. And they'll take those to Goodwill, and then they'll take the rest and put labels on them, men's size, XXL or whatever. And the shoes, we'll rubber band them and put the size, men size 12 or whatever it is. And so all the donations we get that come to the monthly distribution, they don't go out that day. They go back with Bill and Edna and their clothing team, and then they get triaged and they come back out again. And each team will go out with us. We have IKEA bags. And by the way, if you want to buy a great bag for shopping or whatever, or for any other nonprofit, the IKEA bags, those big blue bags, they're only 99 cents. And so we buy those, and every team gets 2 bags each, one for men and one for women. And but the shoes that's something I'm very passionate about. I can't tell you how many times I'm seeing an unhoused person come and get hot food from us, and they have no shoes on, or their shoes that they have are just falling apart. And there's a big shortage of shoes out there. And so as far as the clothing and things like that, I remind the donor, say, let's just think of yourself when you're going camping. What are you going to need? What are you going to have? A sleeping bag, tarps, a tent, jeans, t-shirt, sweater, and things like that. So hiking boots.
And so I saw at the memorial for the unhoused in December that you had sleeping bags in boxes. Is that right?
Yeah.
Where do you, I mean, I looked at that and thought, that's not warm enough even in a heated house. How tell me about those sleeping bags.
They different degrees of sleeping bags. Sometimes they'll get 2, and they have their own set of blankets already, but in the wintertime, they're getting blankets, they're getting 2 or 3 sleeping bags. And yeah, those sleeping bags, that we buy them on Amazon, they come in those little boxes, but they're fairly decent sleeping bags. But we got other items to help them to stay warm, and usually sometimes it's a couple of sleeping bags and the tarp that goes on top of their tent. And hand warmers and so forth. So.
And so you talked about batteries that
Mhm.
sometimes distribute batteries. What is the access for the unhoused in the encampments that you serve to electricity to power their phones? I mean, it's my understanding that most unhoused do have access to a phone. Is that right?
I would say it's about 50%. And then the 50% that have phones, they'll lose them, or they don't get them charged, or the phone will get stolen and they'll have to get a new phone. And so the solar chargers are very, very popular. The solar thing, and you can like $30-$40 from Amazon. We'll have at that memorial, we had one gentleman that every year he takes $1,000 and buys something for the unhoused, gives them to Agape. And this year he bought about 40 or 50 solar chargers. But the challenge there is when you got the winter weather and no sun, it's hard to keep that solar charge working. So when I told you about the end of the world over there on Rough Drive area, heading in Rough, they will, so a street lamp, a power of a street light, they will go in and open it up and get the electricity. You'll see extension cords going from these city lights. And we don't condone this, but they're powering some of them have generators, electric appliances in their tents, and they've got these long extension cords going from one tent to another to the power pole, to the light pole.
So you've talked about helping people get out
Mm-hmm.
with your intake form. What is from your experience, what puts people in an unhoused situation in Silicon Valley? Is it high rents? Is it losing a job? Is it family disturbances? What have you seen?
All the above, everything. And I've always, chicken before the egg thing regarding the drugs and the, did they start doing the drugs before they became unhoused, or was it after? And you hear both. And they're self-medicating to ease the pain. But many of them had drug and alcohol problems prior to becoming unhoused. Many of them had mental and physical health issues before they can become unhoused. Relationships that have gone sour. Husband and wife break up, and she's without any sort of financial help. A lot of single mothers out there. Then you have, there's something in our society that I'd love to get you guys' feedback on this, but when I was 18, it was time to leave the nest. And it was time to go to college or go out there or go out and get a job. And I remember when I was in my 20s, I was in between apartments, and I asked my mom, hey, can I come stay for a week or so? And my dad came home one day, what are you doing here? And I think that's built into our culture, our society, that this independence, and you got to get out of the house at 18 and don't come back. And in other cultures, other societies, that's not the case, especially in the Asian cultures and societies. And so there's an element of that. So when somebody has a problem, their pride will not let them go live with their sibling, perhaps. Or their siblings may be in a financial situation where they couldn't take them in anyway, or there's relationship issues. But there's a lot of issues, and it comes down to affordability of housing. We all know this. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, and then perhaps they get laid off at work. And then in addition to that, they go through a relationship breakup or divorce. And then perhaps there's some alcohol involved, and all these things come together, and you've got somebody that starts out with the couch surfing. They're sleeping on the friend's couch, and they wear out their welcome there. And then they say, well, I'll go live in my car for a while. and then it just eventually it evolves into the car doesn't get registered. They can't clean themselves up in the morning, go on an interview. They don't have access to the internet to get their resume out there. And I mean, just a myriad of issues that once they go down that track of becoming unhoused, it's very easy for them to stay on that track. I encourage all of you to Google it's called Community First. Maybe you've heard of this in Austin, Texas. And Alan Graham is the founder of that. And he had a little nonprofit, kind of like Agape. It's called Mobile Loaves and Fishes. And he was out there delivering things and building relationships with the unhoused. And anyway, bottom line is he started this village. And it's called Community First. And people actually live in these beautiful tiny homes, and they pay rent for them. And I can't say enough about Community First, but now they're starting to duplicate these all over the country. But his name's Alan Graham. We had him speak to us a couple of years ago. And he made a statement that was so powerful. And he said, if you don't get that unhoused person housed within a year or two, this sounds really harsh when I say this, but it's true. They become feral, like a feral cat. And like Chris was when he was unhoused from age 11 to clear to 55. One story analogy that I use when I'm working with Chris in Salt Lake City, this unhoused person that helped me remodel my house. One thing that rang true with me is this, the Park City, I mean, Salt Lake City, you can go up in the mountains very quickly, go hiking and skiing and all that stuff. And I use the analogy is like, okay, well, let's go up and capture a coyote, put him in the box up in the Uinta Mountains, bring him down to Sugar House, the neighborhood, open the front door of the box and say, now coyote, go behave like the rest of the rest of the dogs in the neighborhood. It ain't gonna happen. And so there's a lot of support services there needs to have to help this individual go from being unhoused, sometimes over 15, 20 years, to being housed and an active member and it's a functional member in society.
Sounds like that's the lesson you have learned, though, when you go out in the encampments on the weekend and then you do the follow-up. I want to make space. I want to make space for other people to ask questions besides just me. So, raise your hand, your electronic hand. I see Shirley. Shirley.
Hi, Shirley.
Hi, how are you? I've been involved in the homeless issue for many years. I remember when Reverend Christine Burrows, Presbyterian Church in San Jose, started Urban Ministry, which was the first housing community that was available. It exists now, and it's called Life Moves.
Yes.
You mentioned Life Moves.
Yes.
And is that the major agency to house the homeless in the area?
Life Moves and Path. The Key Abode is another one. There's really about four, we call them the big four, that kind of govern what goes on with the unhoused. That's Destination Home, Path, Home First, and Life Moves. And then Abode is up there also, but yeah, wonderful organizations, but I feel like there's not enough synergy between them. There's not enough synergy between the cities and the county Office of Supportive Housing, especially.
Yeah, the major problem with these agencies is they'll only take that unhoused person for a limited time.
Yes.
And then where do they go after that? I mean, there's something like 90 days or something like that.
Yeah, all sorts of limitations. Yes.
I don't know where they go after that.
Got a call from a young lady, single mother, has 2 kids, and they've been living in their car. and they got into the shelter then in Gilroy. Well, that shelter will let them, I believe it's 30 days they can stay there. And they can stay there during the day. By the way, some of the shelters, you got to leave early in the morning and don't come back till 5 o'clock.
I had a friend who explained to me how, I mean, he also got very ill because, you know, you have to sleep very close to other people.
Yeah, yeah.
He was explaining to me that he had to leave like something like 6 in the morning, and he wasn't allowed to come back into the facility until about
So
9.
she calls me and I get the word out to the different other advocates. Where can she stay after? Because she's in 2 weeks, she's going to be with her kids and living in the car again. And there's I can't remember the name of the nonprofits on my phone, but they take single parents, especially single mothers and kids, but the kids can't be older than 12. I found that interesting. And then the parent has to be working. Well, this lady, she can't work. Her children are 11, 13, 16, and 21.
Goodness.
So where's she going to go? And she's gone through the VSPDAT system, and they haven't pulled her file yet. We use that they're in queue for housing. That's when the file is pulled and say, okay, this is the person we're going to get into housing. And there's just not enough housing. But there's so many different rules and waiting lists just to get into the shelters alone.
So I see Rowan has her hand raised. Rowan?
Yeah, for many years, I had a friend who was kind of on the edge in terms of the kind of job she could do because she had traumatic brain injury from having been an abused woman. And so she couldn't learn new things very well. And when she had a friend who got sick and said, "Oh, please come move in with me and be my helper." And so she gave up her SRO and the landlord raised the rent, you know, by 50% or something. And so when things happened, as things do, drama occurred, she was homeless, and she was homeless for about 6 years. And during those 6 years, I spent a lot of time trying to go. I went with her to her caseworker, and it was a different caseworker every time. You know, there was no continuity. There's no real support for people. And so for 2 years at the beginning of the pandemic, after she got burned out of where she was because somebody did illegal fireworks on the 4th of July and burned the whole Watson Park, including her stuff. Lived in my backyard for 2 years, which it was fraught, but you know, what you do for your friends. But she finally did get into one of the housing situations by St. Park.
Yeah.
But it was such a process. And is it still such a process for people? I mean, how long
it is.
does it take for these folks even when their whatever it is gets pulled? How long does it take to get into housing?
It's about 3 months. We've got people that their files have been pulled. They got all their items together and they're waiting for that hotel perhaps to be remodeled. Or they're waiting. There's some new housing, brand new housing. They're waiting for it to get finished. And but sometimes, quite often, the county will put them in a transitional situation, like living in a motel for 2, 3, 4 months before that housing is their permanent housing is built and ready for them to go into. But it's there's a lot of dysfunction in the whole process, and these agencies aren't talking to each other enough, and they're not following these young social workers that the agencies hire to go do the intake forms. They're not following up, and then, like you said, they're not there. They're going to get a better job. You know, they're not paying them well enough for them to stay. So it's very, very challenging. And if they don't, for example, let's say, I'll just do a hypothetical. You'll say you have Mary Jo that her file has been pulled and she's in queue for housing now. Well, the county is going to call her, and hopefully that she has a social worker working with her. Well, quite often, obviously they don't have a phone, or the phone's not charged. And they'll give themselves 3 calls. If the county calls 3 times and they don't get in touch with them, then they're not in queue anymore, and or 90 days. And so then they have to start all over in this process. And then if they've had their VSPADAT exam test done within the last year, you can't do another one until the year is up. All sorts of rules, and yes, there has to be structure and rules and whatnot, but common sense and compassion should dwarf some of those rules and so forth. But I think that there's another big nonprofit called Built for Zero. It's national. A lot of their money has come from Rocket Mortgage. They've gone into about 85 cities and formed a contract with the city or the county, and they take over everything. They get all these, like we have all these different silos, all these different nonprofits working independently quite often of each other. The Built for Zero will bring them all together and govern and make huge change and eliminate a lot of the waste and the redundancy. And their main focus is, okay, who is the unhoused person and how do we get them housed? They keep it real simple. Boom, 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 boom. If you Google them, they've done a great job for Bakersfield and several other cities across the country. They're so busy, it's hard to even get them to answer a phone because we try to get them to come talk to some of our meetings. But I believe one of the biggest challenges we have with our unhoused situation is all these different silos, these huge amounts of money that come from the county to these big nonprofits who want to do just this one thing. And I'll be honest with you, and I may get some flack for this, especially if it goes on YouTube, but I worry that we have a industrial complex built that's a lot of money is coming into these entities, and sometimes I wonder if they really want homelessness to end. I'm probably going to get some terrible phone calls and emails because of that statement, but there's a lot of us that feel that way. And if they would just work together and eliminate the redundancy, eliminate the waste, and get really efficient, identifying that unhoused person, getting them housed. It sounds way too simple, and it's not simple. But status quo is not working in our county, in our cities. And something different needs to be done. There's some cities that are doing a much better job than we are. And
we're going to just close with 2 songs. I want us all to give a big Zoom appreciation to Todd. You know how to do that. You do it like this, you do it like this, for sharing his experience and his perspective, which is really important because there's nothing like being on the ground or in the encampments to really know what's going on. So that perspective, thank you, Todd.
thank you.
I hope you saw all of our
I did, yes. All of you have inspired me. Thank you for letting me be here tonight.
We appreciate your sharing your stories with us. So we're going to close with 2 songs. Shirley offered to do the when we make peace instead of war, and I'm going to take the privilege of sharing a song that this song was written the year they closed the jungle in December of 2014. Can you believe it's been 10 years? And I was upset, so I wrote the lyrics to this song. So I tried it out today, and I think I remember it. It's not totally true. Some of the stuff is not totally true, but it's sort of true. So if you're not singing, please mute yourself. And I will do my best to do my version of Oh, Give Me a Home. Oh, give me a home where the cops will not roam, where the sinks and the toilets will stay, where never is heard the eviction word, and roofs keep the cold rain at bay. Home, home, San Jose, where the sinks and the toilets will stay, where never is heard the eviction word, and the roofs keep the cold rain at bay. Oh, give me a home where I don't have to roam with my stuff gathered up every day, where funds provide home, where I can be alone, homes for all, not just those at eBay. Oh, give me a home and a door and a phone, a place where my stuff stays all day, where never is heard, move on, it's absurd, where I'm safe and I feel I'm okay. Home, home San Jose, where the sinks and the toilets will stay, where never is heard the eviction word, and roofs keep the cold rain at bay. And we're a little over time, so I think we're going to go right to Shirley. Will you do the honors of when we make? Yes, Shirley. Okay, everybody sing along, but as long as you're.
Yes, sing along. When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war, when everyone is fairly treated, when everyone is fairly treated, how I want to be in that number. When everyone is fairly treated, when no one is without a home, when no one is without a home, how I want to be in that number, when no one is without a home, when healthcare is a right for all, when healthcare is a right for all, how I want to be in that number, when healthcare is a right for all. When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number, when we make peace instead of war.
Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for coming and providing an audience for our speaker. And thank you again, Todd, for agreeing and for telling the stories. It was